All right. I
Cool.
got 130 straight up.
All right. Good. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. My name is Scott Freeman, and with me is Mark Moulter, and we're with the Ouibache Music Festival in West Lafayette, Indiana. And this is part of our continuing Introduction to Music series with the Tippecanoe Arts Federation, and through a grant that we received from the Tippecanoe Arts Federation and the Indiana Arts Commission. So we thank them for this. The idea of the Introduction to Music series is we've reached out to several world-class musicians and educators and asked them to just briefly introduce the music they play, introduce to a variety of folks what inspired them, how did they get started, and hopefully we can just have a little fun along the way. So joining us from Los Angeles, California is a fellow that we had the opportunity to meet here in Lafayette a couple of years ago at the Uptown Jazz and Blues Festival, the great Eric Marienthal. So thank you, Eric, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and Mark's going to ask you some questions, and we'll just kind of volley back and forth, and then maybe have an opportunity to hear some saxophone, and we'll just see what happens over the next hour.
Cool.
All right.
Well, Eric, it's a pleasure to talk with you again, and I've admired your music for a long time, and it's great having you on here. Just wanted just kind of to start things off, just give us an idea of how you got started in music, kind of when you started playing sax, and what got you interested in music in the first place, and kind of when that all happened.
Well, when I first started playing music, it wasn't because of music, oddly. It was in when I was in fourth grade. I was 9 years old, and my best buddy and I were hanging out, and the teacher told us that they were going to do an assembly, and the music district teacher was going to come by and bring a bunch of instruments, and if we wanted to pick one, we could and join the beginning band. And so we went and checked it out, and we both saw the alto saxophone. Saw this, almost not quite this very horn, but and we thought, we didn't really have any idea what it sounded like, but we said, oh, that one looks cool. So we were excited about the way it looked, not about the way it sounded. And so so we both went to the local music store and rented our alto saxophones and joined beginning band, and and it was fun. It was really, really all through, still, quite frankly, it really is just a fun social thing. I think that's what draws a lot of students to playing, starting music and playing in band, because it is such a social thing. You're away from, the academic side of being together, and you're doing something. It's not sports, it's not theater, but it's, something else. And it was just always fun. It's kind of one of those things where you just don't, unless there's a reason to stop, you don't. So for me, there was just never a reason not to keep going, so I did.
Oh, great.
Did you ever play in marching band or anything in high school?
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about that, man.
Roger that. Roger
I
that.
hear you there.
I went to years of therapy to get to the point where I could even think about it.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. It was, that was actually a lot of fun too. And you got to hang out at the football games and, cheer on the band and get out there in the halftime and do the show. And
Sure.
it was, did I prefer marching band over jazz band? No. But I remember just having, fond memories of it.
So yeah, as you progressed through playing the sax through your school years, what kind of music did you generally listen to? Was you attracted to jazz right away, or were you listening to rock and playing along with that? I know I play sax too, and when I first started listening to, played with the records and things like that. But what kind of music were you attracted to through those years?
I When I was in eighth grade, there were some sophomores at the local high school who needed a saxophone player. They must have been pretty desperate, but they came down to the junior high school, and the teacher said, "Oh, talk to that guy. He might want to do it." And so they had me join their band, and it was a quintet. you know, saxophone and trumpet and a rhythm section. And, you know, we were playing like tunes from Kind of Blue and, you know, just jazz standards. And it was really fun. So that was like some of the first music outside of what we were reading in the school band that I was exposed to. You know, pretty wild, right? And then, you know, when I got to high school the following year, I joined the big band, the jazz band, and you know we were playing Sammy Nestico charts and you know Stan Kenton charts and Buddy Rich, you know, tunes and you know, like Sammy Nestico's charts were the Gordon Goodwin charts of that day.
Right.
And
Yeah, I remember
you know,
doing those charts.
every high school band, you know, for sure had at least one, you know, Sammy Nestico charts. I think half of our book were, you know, all Sammy's charts. And so that, you know, so I was listening to that. I was listening to Basie's band and, you know, Buddy's band and Woody's band. And so that was really the music that I was listening to more than, you know, my friends who weren't musicians who were, you know, listening to the Beatles and, you know, do back then.
Cool. So as far as your training, you know, other than the school training, did you take private lessons and just kind of tell us a little bit about your training beyond high school? I mean, did you go on to college and major in music, or what's your additional training that you had other than, you know, just the normal band
I
class?
studied with a, yeah, I mean, I really recommend people take private lessons. You know, I mean, you know, if you're lucky enough to have a good teacher in school, you know, teaching you, that's great. I sure was. You know, I was lucky. But even at that, you know, they've got a lot of people to deal with. You know, most band directors, you know, have one primary instrument, but through their, you know, education, they're learning how to play other instruments, but just enough so that you can explain what that key is and where you put your lips here. And you're not, you know, I mean, unless you've got a super amazing teacher, you know, you can't expect a teacher to be an expert in every instrument, obviously. So, so I was lucky. You know, there was a good teacher, Don Hawkins, who was right down the street, who we used to ride our bikes over to and take lessons from him every week at the local music store. And you know, I studied with Warren Marsh, who was a great jazz musician originally from New York, who was in LA, and I was living in Orange County at the time. That was like my junior and senior years in high school. And he was a very advanced jazz teacher. So I learned, you know, had I been a bit older, I probably would have learned more. I think, you know, half of what he said went way over my head. But the half that sunk in, it stayed with me, and it really helped me tremendously. And so, you know, then it was just a matter of, you know, sticking with it. And then when I went to Berkeley, I went to the Berkeley College of Music after high school and studied with Joe Viola, and that turned me around forever. You know, Joe is one of the, you know, premier saxophone teachers. We lost him several years ago, but he's one of the great teachers ever. And he just taught me, you know, an amazing amount of, not as much, well, it's quite a bit of jazz harmony, but more just how to play the instrument. So that was very inspiring.
Great.
Do you find that to be stylistically? It's you're fascinating to listen to and fascinating to watch. But do you find that with a teacher like this, was he able to tap into something inside you that you weren't necessarily didn't really realize until after the fact? I know for me personally, I've had a couple of teachers in junior high and high school that were able just to reach into there and just pull stuff out of you that you didn't even realize it was in there. How important was that Berkeley experience? Were you able to come out of that and just say, you know, obviously I kind of know the answer to that, but I mean, how important is that to be able to have somebody that you trust that pushes you and pulls that little bit of extra out of you?
Yeah, for me, it wasn't really going to be as inspiring or motivating to have somebody say, okay, good job on assignment number 5, now on to assignment number 6. Okay, good job on assignment number 6, now do number 7. You know, I didn't need a taskmaster. I needed you know, an inspiration. I needed an example, and that's what Joe was. That's what Warren was too, absolutely. But with Joe, he was just such a master of the instrument, and to have him, I mean, you know, we can listen to records and listen to Coltrane and you know, Cannonball and Pierre Londex and all different kinds of people, and be inspired. But when you have somebody sitting right next to you and play
Yeah.
your instrument that well, and you're just feeling it and you're seeing it and it's right there, it was just a head turning, you know. And whenever we would play together, if there was anything that was off, I knew, you know, it was me. And so if something was out of tune, if I was rushing, if I was dragging, if I played a wrong note, whatever, you know, he was just such a precise player. And it really, you know, it got me thinking beyond what he was saying. You know, what did that mean? How do you become such a player like that? You know, how, you know, and so it really is. I was doing a clinic like this a couple of weeks ago, and my buddy John Petitucci, my bandmate with Chick Corea, said it so well. And, you know, he said, man, when you're playing, you just want to be all in on every note, just all in on every note. And so think about that for a minute. You know, we just don't want to fluff anything. The more we stay away from or shy away from part of a phrase, you know, it's just, you know, it's the opposite occurs. You know, if you, well, to put it better, just make sure that every note you play sounds good. That's another, you know, that's my thing. You know, the better thing to say is just, you know, listen to yourself and don't suck. You know, you know, I hate to put it crassly, but it's true. Just listen to yourself, and that was the thing with Joe. You know, he was just so as perfect a player as I've ever heard. You know, and we don't strive for perfection, but we definitely strive to be as good as we can be, and he gave me that example.
That's
And
wonderful.
I think the example, I think you must have listened, because I mean your playing is very precise, and we were talking to Lau last week, and he had a lot of good things to say about you. And one thing he said was, you know, Eric doesn't make any mistakes. You know, and that's your, you know, you're very regiment on, you know, practicing, warming up, and things like that, and take it very seriously to do a good job. So you know, you must listen to your teacher as well.
I did, and I paid Lau good money too. So
Roger that. Well, he was
glad it paid off.
he was very complimentary of your pregame routine. You know, he said every time we get together, it's the same pregame routine. You know, he goes through this and he just runs this routine on his saxophone. You know, and until he gets it right, and it's just amazing. But
I did a tour once with Kurt Elling. We did a tour together in you know, the great singer.
Yeah.
And we did a 2-week tour in New Zealand once, and his regiment was really interesting. He had I think it was actually on a cassette tape, believe it or not. Maybe, you know, hopefully it went digital by now, but and he would just run through the scale routine and sing along with, I don't know what was on the tape. I think piano or something probably was, but it was like a good 2-hour routine. And for a singer to warm up like that before every show religiously, without fail, that same kind of thing, that was inspiring as well, you know. But so it, you know, it sounds great.
sure.
So from can you tell us a little bit about, you know, just some of the people that you've recorded with, played with? You know, you've got a long relationship with Chick Corea's electric band. You know, can you tell us a little bit how you got into that, and just some other folks that you've played with and recorded with?
With Chick, actually, we have a new a live record. They just sent some mixes this morning, as a matter of fact. But we're going to be touring a lot next year. I definitely, you know, hoping that things get back on track. We have a tour scheduled in August of next year and November as well.
That's right.
What?
Oh, we just looked at each other and we said, "There you go." Our festival is in September, so
Yeah, hey, they're booking dates now, so.
there you go.
Anyway, yeah, I joined the band in 1986, way back
Wow.
then, and very abbreviated, you know, version of a long story. But I was playing at this club every Monday night in Hollywood, kind of a seedy little club. You know, if it held 30 people, I'd be surprised. And I was also working in the Disneyland band. I was playing at Disneyland every, 5 days a week.
Oh, cool.
And it was, I mean, yeah, I joke a lot about that, but it was actually a very, very good band. Gordon Goodwin was in it. Wayne Bergeron played a lot in it. So a lot of the guys from Gordon's band, Um, and I used to practice there quite a lot. Anyway, John Petitucci recommended me to Chick when Chick wanted to add a saxophone to the electric band. And he came to hear me play at that little club. And so the next morning he calls the Disneyland band room. This was 1986, right before cell phones. And I jokingly had never forgiven my wife for telling Chick Corea when he called my house to look for me. Leanne says, "Oh no, Chick, Eric isn't here. He works in the Disneyland band. Here's the number." No, don't tell Chick Corea that I play at Disneyland. Come on, you're blowing up. And so he offered me the gig there, and so yeah, it was very. That's how I got that gig, and they were just starting the band's second record, Light Years. The first record didn't have any horn on it, so and so we went on to make at least 6 studio records, and like I say, now we're about to come out with a live record that we did not long ago, actually. But yeah, from there I got my own record deal on GRP Records, and just my newest record that just came out is my 15th record.
Nice.
Solo.
Man.
And gosh, I've just gotten very, very, very blessed in having been able to record for a whole lot of people.
That's wonderful.
That's great.
So taking what we were talking about a little bit earlier with your professor John at Berkeley.
Joe
at Berkeley. When you joined with Chick, did you find that? Tell me a little bit about that relationship and how you developed as an artist, as a sax player. I mean, obviously, Chick being Chick is another one of those guys that is going to push you and take you to limits beyond what you maybe would even expect for yourself. But how did that relationship, we're talking 30 years now, how has that developed you as a musician, and just your relationship with Chick, and how has he encouraged you, and what changes have you seen from 1986 to now just through that relationship? And I'll follow up with a reason why I asked that question. So
Yeah. Well, I don't want to spoil your next question, but to anybody watching this, or any student or anything, if you have an opportunity to play in a situation where you feel like you're going to be the worst one, or it's a situation where you feel like it's way above you, the musicians are way better perhaps, or whatever, never be afraid of that kind of a situation, because that's how I felt. I absolutely felt like I was the worst one in the band, and here's Dave Weckl, one of the great drummers, in the world, John Petitucci, and Frank Gambale, just not aware of Frank. He's just an amazing guitar player. Oh, and that keyboard player too. Chick, I'd say, was pretty darn good too. And so I remember, going into that first rehearsal. We did we were recording first, but the first record, actually, Light Years, was a produced record. So we put it together piece by piece because we just had an idea for it sonically. Every record after that was done entirely live in the studio, but all together and all live. But the first time I really got to play with the band live was at the first rehearsal. And I practiced 8 hours a day for a month just on the music. So when I walked into that rehearsal, I had everything completely memorized, ice cold, and ready to go. And even at that, the morning, I could barely get out of bed the morning before that, morning of the rehearsal. And I got there, and Chick was just so great. And everybody was just so, I knew the other guys. I knew Chick, but I knew the other guys well, especially John. And it was just, and the music was just so great that it just lifts you up. And I think some of the best playing I've ever done has been in that band, no question about it, frankly, because it's just, the great thing about Chick was that every time you play anything, he just says, yeah. Doesn't actually say it, but like with his comping, with his playing behind you, it's just so encouraging. and like whatever you do is great, and the more you go for it, the better it is, and just be you and just go. And there's none of this like, oh man, you're rushing, oh you're a little out of tune, oh you're this, or you're that. Never ever in all these years, So that's what has been inspiring to me, and that's what again, that's what I encourage my students and people who are I know right now we're in a little different situation, but it's not going to stay forever, And when we get back to playing in situations, just don't be afraid to play as much as you can, and try to get with be as lucky as I was, and try to get with people who are going to inspire you.
That's great.
That's great.
What else you got?
So what, as far as kind of some of the other things, I know you've got some private lessons that you do online and some other things. You were telling us a little bit about some projects that you're doing. Can you give us kind of a snapshot of some of the other things you got going on right now?
Well, yeah, I have educationally, I'm part of a school called artistworks.com, and I have the saxophone school, and there are about 31 or so schools. Peter Erskine has the drum school, and John Petitucci and Nathan East have the bass school. George Whitty has a great keyboard school, jazz piano school, and there are schools on just about every instrument. Quite a few on guitar, banjo, ukulele, and all kinds of different instruments too.
That's cool.
So that's fun. I have about 660 students altogether.
Wow.
There. And then in front of me in that direction is my studio. And I put my home studio together. In fact, this is the room I'm in now. We built about 8 years ago. Our house is that way, and we have a backyard between us. So, my wife refers to this room, hopefully jokingly, as our marriage saver.
Yeah.
I could be out here, wailing away on recording or whatever, practicing whenever, and she doesn't hear a thing. So
That's nice.
That's,
yeah.
that's important. I think we all work hard as musicians to, especially Mark and I, to get what we call our gig points. So little things like that can help add to the gig point pile. So anyway,
Right, yeah.
hey, want to change gears just a little bit and talk about the purpose of this series is basically introducing music to a broad spectrum of folks. I mean, we've got some folks viewing that are professionals. There will be some folks viewing later on that are just interested in getting into saxophone. So for that kid who's sitting there watching and listening to you, what advice can you give them to say, okay, here's what I would suggest, how to get started. How do we go about acquiring a saxophone? What am I looking for a saxophone? Where's a good jumping in point for somebody who's just wanting to get into playing saxophone? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, nowadays, like my school, for instance, I teach a lot of very, very just starting off students, and I have some very advanced students as well, and kind of everything in between. And so there is, in the curriculum, you watch, there's 200 plus videos where you can watch, everything from how to open the case to how to play giant steps, and so I like our format a lot, but there are just, I mean, how many resources are there out there, online? The disadvantage is right now we can't get together with a teacher or play in a group, but the advantage is that a lot more educational music outlets are available online. So it really is a matter of, taking that step, signing up with some sort of course, and getting your instrument and not necessarily spending a fortune. I mean, I talk about this a lot with students. I mean, the more you put into your equipment, the easier it's going to be. It's not a matter of, well, I don't need this great professional horn because I'm just starting out. I mean, do you want to spend $4,000 or $5,000 on a saxophone, as a beginner, but you may not even stick with it? I get that, but just understand that,
Excuse me.
you get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. I mean, you can
Right.
get, you can, if you get a good instrument with a good mouthpiece and get the right equipment, it's just going to make it a bit easier. And then also listening to music, like me, when I was a kid. I was telling the story about when I was 9 years old and we picked the saxophone because I did and my buddy did, because of the way it looked. Had no idea what it sounded like. So you don't want to do that. You want to, get an idea of what, if you're interested in getting into music, there's got to be a reason. You
Right.
like music, you listen to music, you are attracted to a particular instrument. So for me still, and for, students and for everybody, it's about being inspired to play. Now we're playing a lot at home. I spend, like I was saying, before we started, I'm heading down to San Diego to do these great shows. We're filming very safely some shows called Saturday Night with Marcus Miller that are going to start this Saturday airing, and we're doing it with George Benson tomorrow, and great Joey DeFrancesco, and then Gregory Porter for the following week. So I have these, exciting things to look forward to. But besides that, it's all here in my studio, So it really is just a matter of being as inspired as you can be, and also just playing. The more practicing isn't just about getting better on your instrument. When you practice, you do get better, and when you feel like you're playing better, you're inspired to keep getting better, to get better and better, to keep practicing. And that's certainly the way it is with me. That's the way it was with me. In college, I practiced it, religiously 4 hours a day, and I had these certain hours, and I was really strict about it. When I came back to LA, I probably doubled that, and I had this routine, and it became a very OCD thing, no doubt. But I really, really got into it. And when I wasn't working, I was, I had my little busboy job, and when I wasn't busboying, I had myself in the cheapest possible living situation you could have. I was renting a room out of a boarding house, essentially. And I was practicing, not at the boarding house, but at the local school, And by the end of that 8 plus hour routine, I felt like Superman. I just felt like I could do anything, and it just felt so great that the next day I wanted to jump back in the practice room and do it all over again. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense.
So what, as far as your practice routine, or what, I know it kind of depends on where you're at, whether you're a beginning student or somebody that plays, like myself, just kind of on the weekends and whatever. What's a good, what would be good advice as to what to practice? I mean, do you like go through all your scales when you're practicing every time, or can you kind of describe that? What you'd recommend there?
I mean, before I started my school, to be totally honest, I had a real regimented way to teach and say, okay, you've got to sit there with the metronome and play, make sure you know all your major scales and play them in ways that are going to not only improve your knowledge of music scales in that sense, but also play them in a way that's going to improve your technique. And I still teach that way for sure, but you can't, it's not a one size fits all kind of a thing. Certain people just, I had students saying, look, I really want to stick with the school. I'm really enjoying playing music, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to become a professional. I want to do this because I enjoy it. So can you teach me in a way that I'm going to get better and learn, but in a way that is going to be more fun for me, and with songs and improvising and all that. And, I thought about it for a second. I thought, well, no, man, this is what you got to do. But then I very, very quickly realized that that's not appropriate at all. That, hey, music is an outlet. It's fun. For some of us, it's a profession, but for most of us, it's enjoyment. It's a recreation, and it's music. It's art.
Right.
And so whatever it takes, and So I have a friend, Brian Scanlon in Gordon's band. He's a big time teacher, and he said that he just had some students just want to just play completely unstructured. He says, they'll improve just, put the thing in your mouth and blow, just go, and that might lead them to like, okay, well, I'm playing and I'm playing pretty good and I'm feeling my chops kind of strengthening. Now I'm kind of ready to maybe dive into something a little bit more technical so I can play what I want to play that much better. And, ultimately we want to be, the better we are technically on our instruments, the easier it is to play the music that we want to play. If you, it's cool, for people just to play songs and do what they want to do and play a lot and develop that to whatever extent. It's okay, but just understand that again, music is sort of universal. So if you only play a particular style and you only play those kinds of songs, then you might get better at that. But if somebody wants to, you can possibly join a band that does this, then you're going to be a fish out of water. If we get better at playing the instrument generically, then it's just so much easier just to switch gears. People say, well, you play straight ahead music and you play some classical music and you play some funky music and you play some Latin music. How do you, do that? It's really like sitting around the dinner table and, having a conversation with your family and at one point you're talking about fish and the next point you're talking about football, the next minute you're talking about surfing, and so you're still using the same language. It's just that you're just shifting gears. And so it's the same thing with music. With us though, we just have to perfect with the language, in this case, the technique of just doing it.
Mm-hmm. How important is in teaching? I know one of the big conversations that I have with teachers and that I have myself when I'm doing workshops and et cetera, and I know Mark has echoed this as well, being paper trained or playing dots versus ear training. And when I'm teaching a workshop and people say, well, I want to learn it exactly the way that you play it, and I'm like, no, you don't, because I already play it that way. Learn the song, get a feel for the song, and then make it your own. So how important to you is when you're teaching, are you able to figure out what works best for, because in your last part of the conversation here, you were saying, it's all the same language, but it's just different topics. Okay, so improvisation, obviously one, or just ear training, or you're hearing something and you're able to take the technical aspects of all of that and just taking it from here through here and then coming out. How important is just being able to hear and learning by ear? How important is that, do you think, in the whole scheme of things?
It's really important. I think that, I have a lot of guitar player friends. I have a bass player buddy who played with John McLaughlin, who doesn't read music. And he intentionally never really wanted to, because he just feels like when you start looking at the paper and looking at the notes, then it takes you away from, the conversation, the actual, the feeling of the music, and you don't learn it as well. And, it's, to an extent, that's very, very true. I'm a horn player, so we started, the very, very first notes we ever played were on the paper, in school band.
Right.
But there are a lot of drummers and guitar players, rhythm section players in general, who didn't do that, started playing on their own. I had a gig, I've done it 2, maybe 3 times, I think now, in Uganda, and I went, and the bass player was the organizer of these big concerts, and they wanted to play like 18 of my tunes, and so a bunch of them I had never even played before. So I wrestled up all the music, and I wrote them and I said, hey, you want me to send the charts? And they said, no, we got it, okay. So I figured, oh wow, they've already they've learned these charts. Anyway, long story short, I went down there and went to the first rehearsal and played the first tune, sounded great. I looked at the piano player and I said, oh, that first chord is an A minor 9. And he looked at me like I was speaking French, Point is, they had never when they wanted to learn their instruments, there were two keyboard players, a drummer, a bass player, a guitar player, percussionist, and nobody had ever seen music, but they played beautifully, and they played everything exactly great, but with a whole other kind of a vibe, and it was just, and they learned 18 tunes that way. But point is, when some people learn their music just by sitting down at their instrument and starting to figure it out, and some with a book. I think, to answer your question, I think it's really important to do both. I think it's important, because if you can read music, there's a lot of, a whole ton of situations for me. You walk in, you get called for a studio session, and you have no clue what you're going to play until you sit down and the music is in front of you. And if you can't read music, you're not going to be on that film or on that record or on that whatever. On the other hand, if you're, sometimes a lot of what's going on in the music is not on the paper, and the only way to play it right is to hear it, to listen. And if you're so stuck in the chart that your ears aren't open, then that's an equal problem on the other side.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that, Eric? Like when you're improvising in a jazz situation, and you're going through the chord changes and everything, do you think about like chord structures, what notes are in that chord structure when I'm playing, or do you go more off an instinct of what you're feeling and playing without kind of thinking through what notes do I need to play on this chord type thing? You understand what I'm saying?
Definitely. There again, I think it's both. For instance, you see a minor chord, you see A minor 7, right? Well, does that mean if you're thinking just the correlation to the chord scale? Well, there's at least four different minor scales you can choose from: a Dorian minor, melodic minor, harmonic minor, natural minor. And that on two of those, the 6 is flat, and two of them, the 6 is natural. So and depending on the voicing of the chord, or how it's being used as a part of a 2-5-1, is it like a minor chord that's or are there extensions? You just have to got to use your ears to find out. And so it really helps to walk into a situation like that, where somebody wants to play a tune and they've got a chart for you, and you've got a chart on it, and you're looking at it, and or you want to learn a song, and you look at the changes, and you sit at the piano or you sit at your instrument and play through it and learn the arpeggio, the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, and the scale that can work. Look at the relationships, because a lot of, when you look at a song, say All the Things You Are, for instance, it's a tune based on 2-5-1s for the most part, and almost like 95% of the song is that way. And so you don't look at it chord by chord by chord. You look at it as in terms of like their root relationship. So D minor 7 to G7 to C major is all C, essentially. Different permutations, but so if your C major scale, for instance, then it's going to go a whole long way. But do you want to just play a C scale over that entire progression? You could. It's not going to sound very exciting, but you could. Work, But then comes in your ears and your musicianship and your musicality and your influences. How did that person play this 2-5-1? How did this person play that 2-5-1? And you adapt that. You don't necessarily transcribe it and copy it exactly, but you can adapt that into what you do. So again, it's important to be book smart and to know your theory, but it doesn't end there. Only so much is on the paper, and you have to just listen to what's going on around you.
One thing that we that is a real common theme with all of you educators is just the passion that you guys have as what I call the keepers of the music right now. Okay, so, and what I mean by that is we are the ones who grew up with fabulous teachers, and we are now the result of their hard work. So now we, as the keepers of the music, it's important for us to be passing this music on to the next generation with integrity, with excellence, and making sure that there's a level and a depth of understanding rather than just just throwing something up against the wall and just calling that music, which which is fine, but as educators, and that's part of our mission with our festival, is just educating and preserving the virtues and values of this music, and along with that comes the understanding of why it's important to play the music with excellence, and why it's important to be able to express yourself in such a way. So, and I already know the answer to the question, but how important is that for you as an educator to be passing this music on with your stamp of approval, with that level of excellence that you bring to it? How important is that?
Well, it's fun. I mean, it's really
that's a great answer.
It is. I mean, it's great when anybody comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to join your school," or "I want to, do you teach privately, or can I, what do you got for me?"
Mm-hmm.
And you work with somebody and listen to somebody play, and there have been times where I listened to a player play. I had this one player years ago who was just so phenomenal, and I listened to him play, and I had sent him some things to work on prior to our first lesson, and we get together, and it was like he ate it up for lunch, and he was waiting. And I thought, wow, really? Can we switch roles here? I think I'm a student. And so you just never know. And you got, there are players like that who want to learn. I mean, everybody wants to learn, including me and everybody. To answer your question, I think that, I think it is fun for, to teach somebody and have them, enjoy what they're doing, have fun playing it, and also, achieve the goal. If they're trying to get past a certain, whatever, improve your sound, or get past a particular technical issue that they hadn't been able to get past before, or break a bad habit that had been, potentially ingrained for years, or just open the floodgate and get, or turn people on to music that they should be listening to and transcribing, and that they perhaps weren't familiar with. I've got some students right now transcribing Paul Desmond solos, and
Wow.
Yeah, oh man, I've got a killer transcription of Blue Rondo a la Turk, and several things, actually. Some Cannonball solos, I had a student transcribe The Sleeper, for the Cannonball Coltrane record, I did that selfishly, I wanted that one.
And that's okay.
Yeah, really. But they did it, and interestingly, and also it's interesting, like we've talked about Gordon Goodwin, that guy right there. We have a camp that we do every year. We weren't able to do it this year, but we have been doing it for a long time. We'll do it next year again. And I lead one of the bands, and one of the student bands, and I've got some stock charts or whatever, and they don't want to play those things. They want to play the hardest Gordon charts we play. So my evil side of me says, well, no, you guys aren't good enough. But the better side of me says, well, okay, let's go for it. And yeah, it might be some train wrecks, but people are loving it, getting into it because it's a challenge. And guess what? By the end of the rehearsal, there's progress made, and that's like exciting, and the students are really motivated to dive in more. And so when you get into uncharted territory as a student, as a player, I should say, because we're all students, and start playing things that you didn't think you could play before, as a teacher, watching that happen is, like I say, it's fun.
That's the payoff, though, man. That is totally the payoff. And when you see that light come on, or you see them, they're saying, challenge me, push me, and it may be a train wreck, and that's okay. Making messes is fun, man. It's really fun. But the part coming out of that is when the light comes on, and they like, I can do this. I can do this. It's okay if I'm messing this up, but I can figure this out. I can get through that. And I love that as a teacher, being able to just watch that light come on, especially when folks are so introverted sometimes when it comes to just wanting to push the envelope. I absolutely love. So yeah, I'm right there with you, man. That's very very cool. So
Yeah, and it's fun with Gordon's band, with Gordon or, other bands that I get to play with. If you play, for students and, to get, either we've been in situations where we've been able to invite some students to the studio to watch, a record happen, or on a movie date, for doing some sort of movie date, and it's somewhat open to be able to invite somebody to watch how the orchestra does it all. That really makes it all real. Rather than just like watching a film and listening to the music and saying, "Oh, that sounds pretty good." When you actually are there watching it happening, it really, people, you learn so much. Even from concerts that we do at clinics or just a regular concert or anything. It's great to be able to inspire that way.
we've got about 15 minutes left here, and I know folks are dying to hear two things out of you. One is just kind of maybe what your pre-game routine might be, is just some of the stuff that you work through when you're warming up. And then we talked a little bit about improvisation as well, and what goes through your mind as far as, when you're sitting and you're just playing for you, okay, per se. Like, Mark and I, we've talked about it when we play. It's like where's my mind taking me, or what is the instrument trying to tell me right now, or what am I feeling? So could you maybe show us a little bit about what your warm-up routine might be in the next couple of minutes, and then could I put you on the spot and maybe ask you to share a little bit of just kind of some musical musings that you may be going through at the time, and just allow that to take us to the end. Is that something you'd be comfortable doing?
Sure. Just happen to have my. I
Oh
wasn't
well,
prepared.
looky there.
And Mark,
I'm totally unprepared. I have no. I had no idea.
and it's a nice older Selmer Mark VI, right?
It is. Yeah, I
Yes.
bought this horn when I was was sophomore in high school, actually.
Yeah, that's what I play too. That's a great horn.
Yeah, I have my signature mouthpiece came out.
I
Last
saw
year.
that.
Thank you. And it's a
Very
very,
nice.
gold plated, so it's very. I don't know if it works well. You can see it well. It's very
That looks nice.
tiny, so it's very contrasting to my patina. That was finished
But
on
it
my-
looks awesome.
It looks
man.
great. That's,
Thank
right.
you. Yeah, I mean, when well, first I'll just play a little bit. Let me see if it's working. So, do you hear that okay?
Yep.
yeah.
Is it loud enough? Okay.
It's
So,
perfect.
yeah, so as far as the practice routine goes, it really just sort of depends. I tend to practice very generically. I find, kind of to what I was saying before about, playing and improving your technique, and from there having your just, your baseline, shall we say, playing be the jumping off point to whatever style you end up playing. If you want to
Sure.
add, inflections or anything you're playing, it can't be something that happens automatically. It needs to be something that you have to think about. So, I certainly, well, I have one routine that I do just as kind of a stretch, where it's like a chromatic scale. So you take that scale, and the practice routine is to play between every note, you return back to the root, like this.
Okay.
Oops. So so that's the routine. The idea, however, is to keep it really. I didn't set this up, but I will right now. Set it. Make sure you play with a metronome. You'll have to take my word for it because you'll never hear it. But just make sure that, you've got your metronome
Right.
going and you're playing everything exactly with the beat, So, like that. So you want to start at the very bottom of the horn and then work your way up chromatically until you get to the top, until you get to F.
Nice.
So again, slowly, and it's not about practicing fast. It's about practicing, you don't want to practice for speed. You want to practice for control, because
Mm-hmm.
if you can control what you're doing, then you can play it at any speed. So,
Sure.
and really when you play, it's about how you go from one note to the next.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
So I'm trying to, again, certain notes are maybe more emphasized than others,
Right.
but every note is audible, and so, but again, the point is to be able to get from one note to the next cleanly. And so,
Right.
going back to that chromatic routine, if you do it from wherever you want to start to the bottom up to the top, and then invert it, reverse it, so that now you're descending, and the repeated note is the one on top.
Great.
And then go all the way down to low B flat. And the other thing too, besides with the metronome, but to change up the articulation. And so sometimes you may staccato everything. You may slur to, tongue to. Oh, sorry. It's hard actually, because
Yeah,
you
definitely.
know you, you might you might be really used to playing that particular exercise with a particular articulation, but the second you change the articulation, come up with something else, it feels like an entirely
Yeah. Your
new thing.
brain is used to one way, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of playing is it's about the coordination between your fingers and your tongue, as far
Mm-hmm.
as playing a
Mm-hmm.
saxophone is concerned. So not everything, but that's a huge part of it. So the
Right.
more we incorporate those different disciplines in any given routine, the more benefit you're going to get. And to that end, another thing, a really simple thing you can do, is to if you're working on a particular scale, say you're working on major scales, it's one thing to play the scale just up and down. That doesn't mean you know the scale. And so one way to turn it into a really advantageous technical routine is to come up with a four-note motif and some sort of math, like 1 1 3 2 4, so 1 2 3 4, and so do that 4 times, and then go up to the next scale chromatically. So, and then make sure you're playing with your metronome and come up with, say, 3 patterns. That was 1 3 2 4. Maybe you could do, 7 2 3 1, or 1 3 4 5, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just write it down so you don't forget. And then with each one, come up with 3 different articulations. Ba, 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 like or Right. So either, tongue two, slur two, or slur two, tongue two, or tongue three, slur one, and
Yeah.
as silly as that seems, I mean, now you've got a major practice routine. You're just
Hmm.
working on major scales as your bass line, but you're going to vary it in three different ways and play each of those three with three different articulations. That's going to take a long time, and
Yeah,
it's,
that's a
it's
good
super
idea.
beneficial.
Great.
So, yeah.
Some good thoughts.
Well, Eric, if we could ask you just maybe to take the next couple of minutes here and play something for us here that you find inspiring, something that you believe that will be able to inspire the kids that are watching here. There's a lot of kids locally and throughout our region that come to these programs and get, this is such a treat for us because we know you, but it's such a treat for them to be able to see this world-class musician, we're talking to them. So could you play something for them and something that might be able to inspire them to want to just take that next step and pick up the saxophone and just go for it? So is that something you could do for us?
No, sorry, I can't do
All
that.
right, all right. It's good talking with you.
See you later, bye. Yeah, I'll make something up, I guess.
Okay, that'll be great.
That's great. Really cool.
All right,
Awesome.
all right. Well, Eric, thank you so much. That
That was
was
great.
such a treat. Tell us again how we can get a hold of you at your music school, and then tell us the address on where we can watch you with Marcus Miller this Saturday.
That's right. Yeah. The first one, Marcus Miller, Saturday night with SaturdayNightWithMarcusMiller.com is the website to see this first show with Joey G. Francesco and George Benson, and a whole crew of great musicians, and Alonzo Bowden, by the way, amazing comedian. So you can go to that website again, Saturday night with MarcusMiller.com, and that'll be every week starting this Saturday, October 10th.
Cool.
And then my music school is artistworks.com, artistworks.com/Eric, or Eric Marienthal if you want to, but www.artistworks.com is the website for our school.
That'll be great.
If somebody's interested in your mouthpiece, you go to your website.
Absolutely, yes. My
Are you going to get one?
I don't know. No, it won't sound like that.
Oh, that's great. Well, Eric, thank you so much. We're up against the end of our time here, but once again, thank you so much into
Thanks, Eric.
to your heart and just your willingness to continue serving the music community the way that you do. I mean, you may not look at it that way, but it's because of great ambassadors like yourself that have a passion for the music and have passion for education, that it's what's keeping it going right now. And the more that we can get kids out of their cell phones and into playing music, I think is, you know, we're going to be better off as a community. So again, our guest has been Eric Marienthal, and we thank you so much, bud.
Thank you very, very much, you guys.
Thanks a lot,
All
Eric.
right.
Appreciate it. It's been great talking with you.
All right.
Likewise. Thank you.
Take
Good to see
care.
ya.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks.